Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And today is our psychology unit. We're trying to figure out what makes us tick, why we think the way we do, and there's something out there called OCD. Maybe you've heard about it, obsessive compulsive disorder. And, some people say that, I act kind of weird sometimes because I have this OCD, so you better forgive me. But today we're going to talk about the fact that, this is actually a real disorder that people do suffer from, and there are lots of symptoms which we're going to talk about today.
Right. Sometimes we joke about this. We'll say someone is OCD when they really aren't, but we find some sort of behavior that they engage in kind of weird. In my family, we kind of joke with my dad that he's OCD. Actually, we never say it to his face. Just the kids were like, it's his OCD. He tends to do the same thing. He's a routine kind of guy. And before we go to bed, he walks around the house at least 3 or 4 times to check the doors. Are they locked? So we do laugh about it. But this is it can be a quite serious disorder that affects people in their lives and ultimately relationships, right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
So, something like your father walking around checking the doors, I would say is more of a personality trait than some kind of disorder. But, some people do this. They do repetitive things over and over. They check the refrigerator to make sure it's closed, and they do that like 20 times an hour. And there are many other symptoms that represent this disease, or I should call it a disorder. It's not quite a disease. We think of diseases in terms of, bacteria or viruses.
Invading your body.
But if it's something in your mind, we tend to say it's a disorder, like ADD, attention deficit disorder. That's one. And this is obsessive compulsive disorder. So these are some symptoms that can't be ignored. Let's find out what this is all about. Let's read the entire contents of our lesson right now.
We all have that friend who seems obsessed with keeping things neat and organized. Whether they color code their sock drawer or are compelled to arrange their things in a particular order, they're likely to shrug off their quirks by saying, "I'm really OCD sometimes." But do such habits qualify as symptoms of an actual disorder? Contrary to how it's often talked about, OCD, or obsessive-compulsive disorder, doesn't just involve a preference for keeping things orderly. It's characterized by uncontrollable and unwanted thoughts, known as obsessions, and the persistent urge to perform repetitive acts, known as compulsions. For instance, an obsession might be the assumption that certain numbers are good while others are bad. Meanwhile, a compulsion could be expressed as a sufferer feeling an excessive need to wash their hands a specific number of times after touching something they deem unclean. While the scope of these obsessions and compulsions can vary, they typically manifest themselves in at least one of 4 core behaviors. The first is when a sufferer constantly checks items, such as locks, ovens, light switches, or something else. The second is a fear of contamination, usually linked to compulsive cleaning, while the third is a need to arrange things in particular ways, often symmetrically. Finally, a sufferer might be tormented by spiraling thoughts, with violent or disturbing images playing over and over in their minds. Though people with this anxiety disorder can usually recognize how bizarre these rituals are, they are overwhelmed by a sense that they're powerless to break free of the cycle.
Okay, let's talk about the contents of today's lesson. It's our psychology unit, and the title is OCD, which stands for Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and it's an obsessive disorder that can't be ignored. We need to recognize that it's out there, and we need to treat it seriously because there are people who suffer from this, and we shouldn't joke about it or even suggest we have it if we don't really have it. So here in the first paragraph it says, we all have that friend who seems obsessed with keeping things neat and organized. Yes, I think we all have one or two friends like that. They are obsessed with cleanliness.
Yeah.
To be obsessed with something means you're always thinking about that thing. You won't go to bed or you won't leave the house unless that thing is done. An old roommate of mine was obsessed with cleanliness, and we could never leave the house unless all the dishes were done and dried and put back in the cabinets. Nothing could be left out before we could go out.
Wow. Really? And he's a guy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. There are some really famous people with this stuff. If you look up celebrities with OCD, I was telling Tom about a comedian in the U.S. that actually uses it in his stand-up routine. That's Howie Mandel. He's a clean freak, and he won't shake hands with people, you know. Charlize Theron, who's beautiful, an actress. Leonardo DiCaprio. There are a lot of famous people that suffer from this. Sometimes it's quite mild, you know. Your roommate sounded like his thing was cleanliness, right, of the house.
Yeah, and everything had to be in order.
Really?
The floor had to be swept and mopped before we could go out.
You're lucky to live with someone like that. I had a couple
in one way, I suppose.
Well, no, I had a couple of college roommates who were slobs, so I would have preferred your friend there.
Yeah, lots of people are slobs, but there are people at the other extreme who are obsessed with keeping things neat and organized. So again here, obsessed is usually in the form of a phrase to be obsessed with something. So, for example, when I was in college, I was obsessed with the Rolling Stones. I had all their albums. I went to see many of their concerts.
Oh, really?
I got autographs from, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and all those guys. I was obsessed with them. I could only think about them. I was a big fan of them. And obsession is the noun form. And also look at the title here, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. That's also related to the word obsessed.
Yeah. One thing that I did in college that drove my roommates crazy is I would like a top 40 song so much I would tape it and have the tape keep running and running and running with the same song. I get obsessed with things sometimes, but yeah, these are some of the ways you can, I think, show others that you have OCD. So whether they color code their sock drawer, meaning they have to have all the white socks together, all the black socks together, all the blue socks together. I have a friend like that. Or are compelled or almost forced. If someone compels you to do something, they're forcing you to do something. You don't have a choice. If you're compelling yourself, there's something in your brain that's not letting you make another choice. So you're compelled sometimes to do things. And Tom's roommate was compelled to make sure their house was organized and very neat before they left. But whether this or that, so we give you two choices if you use that word whether this is true or that is true, or whether this is false or that is false, you're likely to just shrug off these actions and types of behavior as just quirks. You know, sometimes we'll describe a person as being quirky. They've got some weird habits, kind of interesting habits. And sometimes that person they'll acknowledge that it's kind of weird and they'll just say, I'm really OCD sometimes. Like I said at the beginning, we do laugh about this quite frequently, but it can be quite serious.
It could be, indeed. Sometimes it's just an excuse. Well, I'm like that because I'm so OCD sometimes. Here we've got the phrase to shrug off.
Yeah.
Sometimes when somebody asks you a question and you're too lazy to answer by saying no, well, you just raise your shoulders up in the air. That's called shrugging your shoulders. But here the phrase to shrug off just kind of means, it's no big deal. Don't worry about it. It's just a quirk. It's just some unusual behavior that I have sometimes. I'm really OCD sometimes. It's nothing to get worried about.
But sometimes it can be quite serious. So here's the question our author wrote, but do such habits qualify as symptoms of an actual disorder. Contrary to how it's often talked about, OCD, or obsessive-compulsive disorder, doesn't just involve a preference for keeping things orderly. So, yeah, it can expand to other areas. It's not just people who are we call them neat freaks. A freak is kind of like a monster. So a neat freak is someone who's obsessed with cleaning. It can also be characterized by uncontrollable and unwanted thoughts, such as these things we call obsessions, and the persistent urge to perform repetitive acts known as compulsions. So that's where these words come from. So Tom told you he was obsessed with the Rolling Stones.
When I was in college, yeah.
When you're in college, sometimes I get obsessed. I definitely get obsessed with a piece of music that I love, and I'll play it over and over and over until it drives people crazy. Those are obsessions, but they sometimes will leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
They go away. But also, you might have this urge inside you, this force inside you, that you are compelled to perform repetitive acts. I think, when we had the coronavirus, I was always washing my hands. I don't see that as obsessive. I see that as being careful not to get sick. But, other people have obsessions like, I have a sister who just is totally always thinking about her kids, and is someone trying to attack her kids? Is someone trying to kidnap her kids? Or, So that got so bad she had to go see a therapist.
Oh, really? Well, that's not just being a good mother. That's kind of being compulsive or obsessive. Compulsive means you're doing something over and over again. Like my friend, Mr. Zhang, is a compulsive gambler. He's gambling all the time. He's ruining his family. He needs to get help for that. So, again, it doesn't just involve wanting things orderly or clean. There are other symptoms as well, as we're going to say here in just a couple of seconds. Uncontrollable and unwanted thoughts. You're just thinking about things all the time, and you can't seem to stop. Okay, that brings us to the midway point in our lesson for today. Let's take a break now and listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenny. 今天我们要看的是第7单元。今天要谈一个大家可能都有听说过，英文叫做 OCD 这样子的疾病。什么是 OCD 呢？英文的 O 代表的就是 obsessive 就代表的是一种好像有强制性的那种意念。然后呢 compulsive 这个 C 代表 compulsive， 它的意思就是一种好像你会有一种强迫的行为。再来D 代表 disorder 当然就是表示疾病，那意思呢也就是我们中文的强迫症。好，我们来看，那像这样子的一种病症，我们要怎么样来看待它？或者是说，如果你有这种样的病症行为，应该怎么去做，或怎么去控制它？首先，在第一段里面就告诉大家说，的确有些人就是有平常的习惯，好像东西一定要摆在某一个样子，或是一样的顺序。也许这样子的人就会自我解嘲，说自己 I'm really OCD sometimes。 好，这当然就是一种自己对自己开玩笑的说法。可是他就说了，那这样子有这种习惯，如果你东西一定得要摆整齐，按照某一定的顺序来摆放，这样子的习惯就代表说你就是有 OCD 这样的疾病吗？好，看到这个片语 qualify as， qualify 这个动词就代表合格。好，换句话说，有这样子的习惯的人，是否就符合了所谓的你是有这种真正的病症的症状？好， qualify as， 记得 as 这个字当然通常后面加的就是一个角色，一个地位。接下来在下一段你还会看到 as 放在其他的片语，我们再往下读。下面这边就提到说了，我们常常讲的 OCD 所谓的 obsessive compulsive disorder， 它这里有2个字，我们来分开解释一下。就先谈 O 这个字。好， O 这个 obsessive， 或者是说你说它 obsession， 这个跟你的思考有关，你的想法上面可能会有一种强迫性的思考。注意到这里的片语 他描述这种的病情，然后说他 known as obsessions。我们在第一段提到了 as， 往往后面就是加某一个角色、某一个定位。好，这里也一样，我们说它是一种强迫性的思考。好，跟 obsession 这个字有关。那再来另外一半就是 compulsive， 或者是我们用它的名词 compulsions。当你说有一个人他可能会一直执行重复性的行为，而且有这种内心持续上的冲动，我们说它是 compulsion， known as compulsion。 好，这两个片语里面 known as 也就是我们说被称为是。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're talking about OCD, which is the acronym for the obsessive compulsive disorder. And don't worry, guys, you can just memorize OCD. Everybody knows what that means. You don't have to say the full name, which can be quite hard if you're, it's not your native language. So don't worry about that. In fact, most of us just say OCD. Oh, he's OCD or she's OCD. Sometimes they really are, though, so be careful. Now, we're going to be talking about some of the behaviors that you might find in someone who has OCD. You might have these obsessions, or you might even have thoughts that drive you insane. So here's an example. An obsession might be the assumption that certain numbers are good while others are bad. And it might drive you to actually never buying something where the price tag had those numbers. Or maybe you were given a number as you're waiting maybe to pay your telephone bill. You know how we have to take numbers and wait for that number to be called? Some people are so crazy about numbers, they won't take that number, they'll take another one. They hate that number so much. So it can be kind of insane. So assumption, what's an assumption? Assumption is some sort of idea that you believe. It can be accepted as true or as certain to happen, but you don't have any proof. You're assuming something. For example, when I saw our dog and he had frosting around his mouth, I assumed, or my assumption was, he had eaten a piece of our chocolate cake.
Assumption, that's the noun form here. The verb is to assume. So I can give you an example here. When I first came to Taiwan, as a white person who's kind of tall, people saw me and they made the assumption that I was a missionary. But I certainly was not. And they assumed that I was a missionary because I was a Caucasian person walking around and stuff like that. There are a number of missionaries here in Taiwan, so people make that assumption sometimes. Well, some people assume that some numbers are good and some are bad. Like maybe 7 is a good number and 4 is a bad number. And meanwhile, at the same time, a compulsion could be expressed as a sufferer feeling an excessive need to wash their hands a specific number of times after touching something they deem unclean. So this is a compulsion, something that you can't stop yourself from doing, like you're a compulsive gambler or a compulsive shopper. So this compulsion would describe someone who has this excessive need to wash their hands a specific number of times. Excessive just means too many or too much. So most of us, we wash our hands, maybe 3 times a day after meals or before meals or something like that.
When you go to the bathroom.
Exactly. Yeah. But maybe somebody would think, hey, I just touched, a dirty handle in the bathroom, so I need to wash my hands exactly 7 times. 5 times is not enough. 6 times is not enough. It's got to be 7. If it's 8, it's too much. If it's 6, it's too little. It's got to be exactly 7.
Now, someone who has OCD could be described as someone who is an OCD sufferer, or you could say he or she suffers from OCD. Yeah, washing your hands a certain amount of times is kind of strange to me. So, yeah, that would be tough. It's almost like they don't have a choice. In their minds, if they don't do it, it'll drive them nuts. And so you get used to people, having these different types of behavior. I have a nephew who suffers from some interesting behaviors, but I've gotten used to it now. So when I'm with him, I don't think anything. But I remember thinking, why is he blinking his eyes like that? But he suffers from something a little different, Asperger's. So anyway, you have this excessive, or excessive, like Tom said, just means it goes over what you think would be normal, excessive. I have an excessive number of plants in my apartment because I love potted plants. Some people think it's excessive and looks like a jungle when I open the door, but I love them. So, yeah, some of them really need to wash their hands a specific number of times. Now, the scope or the range, that's what scope is, the range of something, of these obsessions and compulsions can vary. They're not all the same. They typically manifest themselves in at least one of 4 core behaviors, 4 core primary or main behaviors. We've got 4 of them. If you manifest something, or something is manifest to you, it's showing you something. It's clear to you. It's obvious. You can see it. So manifest. So they manifest or show themselves in at least one of 4 core behaviors. What are those behaviors, Tom?
Okay, well, the first is when a sufferer constantly checks items such as locks, like your father.
My dad.
Ovens, light switches, or something else. So, yes, this is a clue that the person is suffering from OCD. They will constantly check different kinds of things, like locks to doors and stuff like that. Ovens to make sure they're turned off. Light switches all over the house, not just the ones in the room you've been using, but all over the house. Or anything else. You got to make sure the refrigerator is shut and the freezer is tightly shut. All the cabinets are closed, all the dishes are washed and put away, etc., etc. These are various obsessions. These compulsions manifest themselves in various ways.
It's funny because my dad has 2 of these. He checks the locks, but he also walks around the entire house and turns off the lights.
Wow.
And I can't tell you how many times I was in the room reading a book and Dad, but that's just, but I never thought about this in terms of OCD until my sister said, I think he has OCD stuff.
I wonder what I'm suffering from because I always forget to turn off the lights. When I leave the bathroom especially, it's always left on when I go to bed and I got to get up and go turn it off. But that's the first way in which this particular obsession manifests itself.
So constantly checking things. Number 2 is a fear of contamination. Contamination means something has been made dirty or it's unclean if something is contaminated. We talk about it sometimes. Food can be contaminated, or maybe your water is contaminated, it has poisons in it, or something that's not healthy for your body, it's polluted. So the second is fear of contamination, and that would lead to your roommate's compulsive cleaning, right? Yep. Well, the third, what's the third?
The third is a need to arrange things in particular ways. Often symmetrically. If something is symmetrical, it's well balanced. We like to have symmetrical faces, for example, our eyes to be the same size and in the exact same positions on the left and right side of our faces. Symmetry is the noun, symmetrical is the adjective, and symmetrically is the adverb. We need to arrange things symmetrically.
Finally, this is the 4th kind of main behavior, is a sufferer might be tormented by spiraling thoughts. So it's almost like they can't control the thoughts in their mind. And when you see that word spiraling, it just means it starts out small, but then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yep, to spiral out of control, for example. And they might have these violent or disturbing thoughts or images, and they're playing over and over in their minds. That's when it is a big problem. And though people with this anxiety disorder can usually recognize how bizarre these rituals are, they are overwhelmed by a sense that they're powerless to break free of the cycle. So yes, I've seen people on TV who have this condition. They are very much aware that they have this behavior and they recognize that it is unusual, but they're powerless to do anything about it. They're overwhelmed by the sense that they are powerless. If you're overwhelmed, it's just too much to think about. It's just too much to worry about, and you cannot handle all that information. So you feel, I'm powerless. I know I've got this problem, but I really can't do anything about it.
You can go and see professionals to get help. I've seen in my sister that it's helped her a lot. So if you are listening to any of these behaviors and you recognize some of those in you or a loved one, try to see a psychologist. It can change your life, really.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. Time now to listen to our Chinese teacher.
好，我们继续往下看。当然提到了 OCD， 提到 O 的定义 C 的定义，说起来就是在思想上有强迫性的思考，在行为上你有强迫的行为。当然咯，如果说 OCD， 那这种强迫的行为你会怎么表现呢？好，其实他就说啊，有强迫性的思考跟强迫性的行为在这个 scope 上面。好， scope 就是指就像我们拿这个镜头在看东西一样，这个圈圈到底有多大，你这个范畴可能有不太一样的地方。不过他告诉你大概会有4种核心行为里面至少有一种，那我们在这一段里面就会提到是哪4种。好，当然我们知道我们在写文章的时候，如果你已经在你的主题句里告诉大家有以下4种行为之一，那你就要注意到你接下来提的转折词就要清清楚楚，层次看起来才明白。好，当然就会这边既然说4种，就会有 the first， 接下来就会有 the second， the third， 然后到最后一个 finally。 好，这些就是我们在文章，在你发展一篇文章的内容的同时应该要注意到的用字。好，那这4种行为就像他这边写的，一种就是会一直检查，到底灯有没有关，到底电源有没有关掉等。然后第2种就是你对污染会有恐惧感，会一直想，如果你什么东西污染你以后，你会强迫自己要去清洁它。好，还有第3种，他就说了，这就表示你会用特定的方式去整理东西，而且你整理的时候往往是 symmetrically， 也就是对称性的摆放。最后一个就是有一种 spiraling thoughts， 有一种思考螺旋，换句话有一些重复的画面，重复的想法跟念头，让你不安的景象会一直在大脑里面出现。 OK， 好，我们今天所做的说明跟讲解就到这边，我们下次见。
That's it for today, everybody, but please join us again next time when we continue to talk about OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder. Please join us then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.